Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, you porcupine, you. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey, coming to you for our weekly episode every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. I hope that you are subscribed on your favorite podcasting app. I hope that you are following the Free State Project on your favorite social media pages, whether that be X or Facebook or Instagram, or we're even on TikTok. Though this show you're really going to only get on podcasting apps, on Facebook, on X. We also have it on YouTube. You can find it there. Subscribe wherever you most like to enjoy your podcast, and we really appreciate you joining us this evening for another great episode. You know, before we get into our conversations, I have a question for you. Do you know the old saying on the 4 stages of winning? I think we've all heard this before. First, they ignore you. Then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then what happens? Then you win. You got to go through all 4 stages to get there. Well, that's the story of the Free State Project. 22 years ago, we began arriving. Free Staters began arriving to reinforce the inherent libertarian culture that has long existed here in the live free or die state. At various stages of the last 2 decades, Free State libertarians were ignored as a fringe movement, ridiculed with fake news about bears, and fought at every turn in campaigns for state and local offices. Today, however, progressive statists are finally admitting defeat. They've lost New Hampshire to the libertarians. And it is a thing where it was once such a hotly contested tug of war for the state legislature in New Hampshire. Last February, the National Democratic Party, focused on state legislative fights, they announced their list of battleground states for the next election cycle. And for the first time in quite a while, New Hampshire was not on that list. New Hampshire has dropped off being considered a battleground for control of the state legislature by national Democrats. And there was just a recent story that was published, one of these publications recently, looking at the state of the governor's race in Massachusetts versus New Hampshire. You know, Massachusetts, a Democrat stronghold, Democrat governor. Already there are 2 Republican candidates who have filed for the primary to challenge that Democratic incumbent. But in New Hampshire, there's not even any names being floated for governor. Have they truly given up? They seem more focused on the federal races than on the state races. And you know what? As we work to chip away at tyranny on the state level here in New Hampshire, I suppose that's fine by me. With Liberty legislators forming one of the largest coalitions now within the majority GOP caucuses of the New Hampshire House and Senate, progressive sacred cows are being demolished as they work to slash spending, cap property taxes, abolish income taxes, liberate families from school monopolies, repeal car inspection requirements, and even establishing a strategic Bitcoin and sound money reserve. In fact, that last one has driven a lot of people crazy. I think it was very nice to see. I know this is just some guy on Reddit, but some progressive New Hampshire guy on Reddit posted a photo of Representative Jason Osborne and Representative Keith Ammon next to Governor Kelly Ayotte at the bill signing of the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Representative Jason Osborne and Keith Ammon, both individuals who moved to New Hampshire as participants of the Free State Project and are now leaders on liberty policy in the state legislature. Well, I think that this random guy on Reddit summed it up with the caption, "The Free Staters won. The future of New Hampshire, everybody." Well, that's where we're going. And we are winning so much that progressives in the legislature are now making public accusations that all these policies, especially school choice, are recruiting tools to bring more Free Staters to New Hampshire, as Democrat Representative David Luneau recently embarrassed himself in committee hearings, sounding like a bit of a conspiracy nut. You know, that's what they always call us, a conspiracy nut. as he says that education freedom accounts are, quote, really turning into a recruiting tool to bring free staters to the state of New Hampshire. Well, I spoke with the publication that was writing on that, and they asked me for my response to that, and I let them know, you know what? He's actually not wrong. School choice, gun rights, low taxes, all of these policies contribute to New Hampshire being ranked the #1 state for freedom, and are reasons why that free staters continue moving to New Hampshire as we build the freest state in America. Now, to the dismay of progressives, these freedom policies do help bring more folks here, and they also improve the quality of life for all productive people who are already living here. That's why U.S. News and World Reports recently announced yet again that New Hampshire is ranked #1 for economic opportunity in the country, and on a lot of other factors. But it's important to know that it wasn't always like this, with progressives whining and libertarians winning. Well, a libertarian ethic is deeply rooted in New Hampshire culture. Creeping authoritarianism has gradually captured the institutions of every other state in New England. We see it as our neighbors in Vermont and Maine, and I say this especially sad for the sorry state of Maine, where I moved from. We see it as people lose their gun rights and their medical freedoms, as they surrender their children each day to ideologically captured government school monopolies, as they take home smaller paychecks, as tax burdens grow to fund the expansion of nanny state welfare bureaucracies. That progressive ideology, which has captured all these other states, is not alien to New Hampshire, but neither is the libertarian spirit of 1776 that once looked on an empire in the eyes and brought it to heel. Now, while I respect all libertarian traditions, there's something uniquely bold and populist about those descended ideologically from the New England Sons and Daughters of Liberty. And as we approach the 250th anniversary of 1776, only in New Hampshire does the spirit and ideas of our American Revolution still animate what's going on in state governments. And that is due in no small part to the libertarian concentration strategy that many of us are participating in, providing reinforcements to bolster New Hampshire's native libertarian culture and the remembrance paid to our revolutionary history. Now, that's why all of that revolutionary spirit, all of that that progress that's being made in the advancements of liberty as we defeat the progressive statists who want to control New Hampshire just like they've controlled some of the other states in New England, that spirit is going to be alive this June 16th through the 22nd at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. There is a revolution for liberty happening in New Hampshire, and at PorcFest this year, we are inviting everyone to come out and taste the revolution. Taste that revolution that's brewing in New Hampshire with a week of camping, community, and conversation. I want to let you know, ticket prices are going up this week. They're going up on May 16th. That's this Friday. So Thursday is the last day that you can get tickets at a rate of $100 a ticket for adults. Child tickets are always deeply discounted, ranging from like $1 to $10. Please bring your kids, your whole family. It'll be a great experience. Tickets right now for adults are $100, but they're going up on Friday to $125. So you're going to want to act quite quickly to get your tickets, and please use my discount code Granite Gulch. That'll get you another 10% off. We are looking to have a great turnout this year. We've got so many great speakers coming out to taste the revolution with us. Joel Salatin, Connor Boyack, Corey DeAngelis, Bob Murphy, David Friedman, Matt Kibbe, Clifton Duncan, Jack Hunter, Scott Horton, Hannah Cox, Jacob Hornberger, Mark Rendazza, Dr. Simon Gadek, Steve Robinson, and many, many more. That's just the tip of the iceberg, guys. And if you want to learn more about those speakers, then you should go to porcfest.com and you can see all about them there. And I'm really excited that this year we are bringing back not just an old tradition, the one-pot cook-off, where you're going to find many celebrity libertarians, including yours truly. If you consider myself a celebritarian, I suppose that's a debatable point. We're going to be our chefs for the one-pot cook-off. If you get a ticket, you get to go around the campground, meet so many of your fellow attendees, and you get to sample all the dishes, and you get to decide who made the best dish for the one-pot cook-off. So please come out and join us for that. And I'm really excited that we're also bringing back Porcupines, our family programming of this year. We had over 100 kids in attendance last year for PorcFest, our family-friendly freedom festival, and we're hoping to have even more this year. Returning this year are our Wildlife Encounters Animal Show, where kids get to meet a real porcupine. I'm going to be coming back again with the second year of the Porcupine Mock Legislature, giving giving young people aged 10 to 17 the opportunity to elect a Speaker of the House, form their own political parties, and take a bill all the way through the lawmaking process. It was very well received last year, and we'll be bringing it back. Last year, I did a story time with the kids, reading Tuttle Twins books to the kids. This year, we've got the author himself, Connor Boyack, is going to be reading one of his books to the kids. And also great professional puppet shows, so many things, so much great family programming. You're going to want to bring the whole family. And of course, that's only one aspect of PorcFest. Learn more at porcfest.com, get your tickets, and taste the revolution. All right. That's my monologue for today. Thank you for bearing with me. I think we're all here, though, for the real conversation that we're about to have. We've got a great guest today, a returning guest to the program, someone who's become a good friend of mine, actually, since moving to the Free State, even though he doesn't live in the Free State. But he does work for a great organization called Citizens for Sound Money, which was founded by one of the great archetypes, one of the great models of what a liberty legislator should be. A great New Hampshire state senator who was named Jim Forsythe and who passed away last year, unfortunately, very tragically. But he is continuing on Jim Forsythe's work at Citizens for Sound Money as the executive director for Citizens for Sound Money. And his name is Daniel Diaz. Let's welcome him to the show.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to have you. You know, I know we've had you... we welcomed you last year to Liberty Forum and to PorcFest. We just welcomed you again just a few weeks ago to Liberty Forum, which we really appreciated having Citizens for Sound Money as a sponsor, and appreciated hearing from you on the main stage. I know, Daniel, that you and your organization have been hard at work in state legislatures advancing sound money policy. And it sounds like you've had some really significant victories lately. As proud as we are in New Hampshire right now of the strategic Bitcoin reserve, which also does allow the state treasurer to invest in gold and silver and sound money. I think that's a good thing. But you guys have been doing some good stuff in other states. You want to tell us what's the policy you've been pushing, and what are some of the victories you've been having lately?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little bit of background about C4SM before I jump into what we've been pushing.
Go right ahead.
As you mentioned, Jim Forsythe, former senator in New Hampshire, he started Citizens for Sound Money during the silver squeeze of 2021. And, with the mission to promote the use of sound money and protect people's rights to do so. So one of the ways we promote sound money is, we provide, we give free digital ounce of silver for people who join our membership program. We give away free silver with our own rounds. We promote, the fiscal benefits of saving in gold and silver. And we protect people's rights through legislation by getting rid of taxation on gold and silver, making it legal tender to elevate it from personal property to money or legal tender. And we have been really doing our hardcore lobbying, I would say, in 2023. So about 2 years now, shortly after I came on as legislative director. And we've been pushing the Sound Money Act. It's called different things in other states. In Florida, it was just called the Legal Tender Act. In Missouri, the Missouri Freedom Initiative. And when I was at the Liberty Forum, I actually changed my flight to leave a little earlier because it was supposed to be passed in the Senate. So I got back. We were working the legislation along with other stakeholders and other organizations like the Economic War Room with Kevin Freeman. We worked together this year in Florida, and we did as well last year, lobbying in Florida together. And it got through the Senate. We made a huge post. A few days later, it got through the House, and it's on its way to Governor DeSantis to get it signed, which is a huge win. It will be the largest state in the union to make gold and silver legal tender. And not only did it make it legal tender, it set up the regulatory framework so that electronic transfer of gold and silver or asset-backed digital currency companies can come in, get licensed, and there will be consumer protections for them to operate within the state of Florida. It is the most comprehensive sound money legislation in the country when it comes to the electronic transfer of gold and silver. And when it comes to physical, it's almost there. There's a few things we need to tweak. And then shortly after that, I think the following week, Missouri passed it. So we worked very hard. We spent 2 months working the legislature, getting some important votes, and ultimately at the end of the day, it failed because of the sponsor in the Senate. There was personality issues, and we got it through this year miraculously. Senator Moon added it as an amendment to a germane bill on a huge omnibus fiscal bill that all leadership wanted to get passed. So they added it onto that, and it got through the House in less than a week, and it's on its way to the governor. So Missouri and Florida were huge wins. Let's not take away the fact that Alabama and Idaho also make gold and silver legal tender earlier this year. And there's still several states in play. You have Texas that has a hearing tomorrow. I'm going to be testifying remotely in Texas. Louisiana has legislation. The hearing didn't go so well in Louisiana. Ohio has legislation. North Carolina, Alaska. I testified in Alaska. I'll be testifying again. So there's legislation all around the country that's still alive to make gold and silver legal tender or electronic gold and silver legal tender. Louisiana already had its gold and silver as legal tender. The electronic portion of the legislation had some critical discussions. We weren't there, but yeah. So there's still states in play. There's things that we might be able to do to help move it along, but yeah, man. This year, when you were talking about earlier in your monologue about how first they make fun of you. I forget the 4 stages of winning.
Yeah, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
That's how the entire sound money movement's been since 1971, right? First, they ignored us. I mean, there wasn't really a peep. There wasn't really a movement. And we're, like the movement today, J.P. Cortez, myself, Economic War Room, we're standing on the shoulders of giants that laid the foundation of sound money, right? I mean, we had a moratorium on minting gold and silver from the 60s till 1985 when Ronald Reagan allowed the golden eagles and buffaloes and the silver eagles to be minted. That was a huge win for the movement, but it still wasn't considered money. It was legal tender at the federal level. And then you had G. Edward Griffin. You had Ron Paul. Ron Paul really brought a light to the problems with the Fed, like end the Fed, your catchphrase.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had giants that are still around today. You have David Morgan, you have Mike Maloney, you have Keith Weiner from Monetary Metals, who have worked to try to get legislation through. And Keith Weiner worked super hard for years trying to get legislation, but he didn't throw in the towel, but he transitioned to focus on building Monetary Metals. And the first piece of legislation, I would call him, he's the modern OG of the sound money movement, Larry Hilton. He is the general counsel of Goldback Inc., and he's also the general counsel and founder of the United Precious Metals Association. It was him in 2011 that broke the cycle of losing, and we had our first victory making gold and silver legal tender back in 2011 in Utah. And from all the giants, Keith Weiner, Mike Maloney, G. Edward Griffin, Ron Paul, everybody who's worked in the movement to today, if it wasn't for these giants, these legacies, and let's move to what Jim did. Jim, when we started, we didn't know there was other organizations other than J.P. Cortez and Sound Money Defense League. And we learned while we started lobbying that you have the Missouri Freedom Initiative, who is regionally involved in trying to get legislation. They got Missouri Freedom Initiative got Arkansas to make legal tender a year ago. They also help with Idaho, Iowa drafting legislation. They're more of a regional sound money organization. Economic War Room, we learned about them right before I got hired in Texas, and then they were helping out in Florida. So this movement's growing. And the fact that we went from one state in 2011 to this year, of all the states that have passed it, we're still waiting for Missouri and Florida to get signed by the governor, which they both indicated they will. We went from one state in 2011 to now 10 states in the union that make gold and silver legal tender. And maybe Texas will get it through, maybe Oklahoma, maybe Ohio. So there might be more states. We had a 60% increase in states making gold and silver legal tender this year. And it's a movement. We're winning. Year after year, decade after decade of losing, we're finally winning. And I think once we get to that threshold of maybe 25, 30 states that make gold and silver legal tender, that will create enough pressure on the federal government to reevaluate the capital gains and the treatment of gold and silver as collectibles, and hopefully declare it as money once again, like it used to be early on in our country before Ulysses S. Grant stacked the courts to allow paper money as legal tender. The Supreme Court ruled that you can't make money legal tender, and Ulysses S. Grant didn't like that, stacked the courts, and they made greenback legal tender back there in the Civil War era. So, I mean, it's been one heck of a fight in the sound money movement. I'm excited and honored and humbled to that Jim and the board asked me to be executive director and taking up that torch of freedom that he started with Citizens for Sound Money. He's a modern founder of the sound money movement. He has done something that nobody else in the gold and silver industry has been able to do, is bring competitors together, bring industry leaders together to work for a common cause of bringing liberty and freedom to the people through sound money and the sound money movement.
Well, it certainly is. When I think back to, I mean, even as late as 2008 and 2012, and Ron Paul talking about sound money and talking about the Federal Reserve, and even then, I mean, you got kind of these brush fires of interest, and people realized that this was an important issue, but he was dismissed as a gadfly, as a gold bug, as like, this isn't an issue anyone cares about. Why does it matter? Why are you spending so much time talking about it? We kind of, maybe we were, for a while, we were in the peak high of fiat money as we've been able to export the inflation around the world. But I think probably really in that 2008 kind of housing crisis, people started to have a bit of a wake up call that not all was right in the economy. And it seems like gradually and then suddenly, the sound money movement has found some real momentum. And to see this happening in many states is great to see. I mean, New Hampshire now can invest its treasury reserves in gold and silver as well as Bitcoin, is a big step forward. But let me ask you about legal tender specifically. Now, I know my last term in the Maine Senate, I sponsored a number of gold and silver bills to remove sales taxes and income taxes and many things. One of them was to restore the legal tender status for gold and silver. And let me ask you, for the audience, why, particularly on a state level, why is it significant to restore the legal tender status? What practical impact does that have in the life of someone who is seeking to transact in gold and silver? Does the lack of a legal tender status stop someone from being able to do that? What's the positive difference that it makes for someone?
That's a great question, and that's a question a lot of people come up. In fact, that was a question that the chairman of the State Affairs Committee in Alaska asked. I was on as an expert witness, but the timing didn't work out. I couldn't answer the question, so I actually wrote a response this weekend and sent it to all the committee members. And essentially, right now, in almost every state where it's not legal tender, gold and silver is treated as personal property. And when you use gold and silver in a transaction, it's typically used as a barter instrument or barter transaction. And a barter transaction doesn't have the same protections as a monetary transaction. So what it does is right now there's contractual ambiguity when you use gold and silver, because they, like in Florida, if I did a deal with gold and silver for, let's say, fixing my car or some other transfer of ownership or purchase, and let's say they didn't give me the service or they did not give me the item, I have no recourse, no legal recourse in the state of Florida. That happened to me. I was a crypto miner and blockchain consultant. I found a repair guy. Instead of paying him cash, he said, hey, for every 10 GPUs that I fix, let me keep one. I'm like, perfect, let's do that. We did 2 rounds. I did smaller, 20, 30 GPUs. And then I said the last one, I'm like, let me give him like 40, 50 GPUs. The last one he didn't return. So I called the police, the detective gave all the information. Right before they were about to issue a warrant to arrest him for grand theft, the detective called me. He's like, hey, you didn't use any dollars. There was no financial transaction. I'm like, no, it was an agreement. I gave him the GPUs for every 10 he fixed, he gave back. He's like, well, I'm sorry. Well, we can't issue a warrant, and there's nothing we can do. It's not legally protected. Right? So that is a huge issue. When you're dealing with personal property and barter transactions, you don't have the full legal protections of law in civil court or criminal court and so forth for legal recourse. So even in contracts, it's ambiguous what the court's going to say if you're dealing with gold and silver versus money. There's also tax complexities because personal property, I mean, if you do a transaction personal property, those might trigger different types of tax liabilities within your state. If you have state taxes, you don't know what this. If you don't know what's going to happen, I mean, that causes more financial burdens. And then personal property is typically taxed higher than just monetary transaction, like the sales tax, consumption tax. So, and there's also limited legal recourse. I was just saying, you won't be able to call the police and file a report and get them arrested for stealing from you. So there are some major impacts. So it isn't just constitutional correction by making gold and silver legal tender. It's also consumer protection reform. Elevating gold and silver from a personal property to money is a huge deal, especially for those who deal with it every day. And I pay with gold backs. I've paid people in silver eagles, which is legal tender, but even silver rounds or gold gram bars or whatnot. So for me, if those transactions that I've done, there's no legal protections for either party.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell me more about the electronic transfer aspect of this. Are we talking about like gold-backed cryptocurrencies? Or are we talking about, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, so in Florida, we didn't, so in a lot of states like Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, they're trying to make electronic currency legal tender. It's a little heavier of a lift than just setting up the regulatory framework like we did in Florida. So in Florida, Florida has fantastic regulations when it comes to money services businesses and custodians, right? Like banks and so forth, like credit unions. They have to meet certain qualifications to hold dollars. So what we did was we used the current regulatory framework in Florida when it comes to custodians of money, since we're elevating gold and silver to money, and getting rid of the FDIC and the credit union insurance, because that's the only two qualifications a custodian can't meet, because FDIC and credit union insurance will not cover gold and silver. You have to use a private company like Lloyd's of London. So, but they have to meet all the other qualifications to be a custodian in Florida. And you have to be licensed to the Office of Financial Regulation. So we use current regulation, modified it for gold and silver. And then when it comes to, say, Kinesis or the UPMA, because UPMA has a digital transfer and they have a debit card, or Glint, or any other gold and silver company that wants to transfer ownership of gold and silver back and forth, we use current Florida regulatory framework through the money services businesses. And all you got to do is file and meet the qualifications of the money services business, and you can operate in the state of Florida. And there are, they have to be audited, I think, once every year or 2 years. They have to meet the financial threshold. I think you have to have at least $100,000 or $200,000. Oh no, not $100,000, maybe $3 million in a bank account or assets, and then you have to pay a $100,000 or $200,000 licensing fee. So there's a threshold. No Joe Schmo or no small startup can become a licensed money services business for gold and silver, and not everybody can become a custodian because the threshold for being a custodian is pretty high. So that's really what we did. We didn't make, by doing that, asset-backed digital currency companies can operate within the state of Florida. In fact, some crypto companies that were trying to get the Bitcoin reserve in Florida and wanted to bring gold and silver like crypto transactions to be accepted by the state of Florida, they can look. We've already been contacted by the Office of Financial Regulations, where they were going to connect me with these companies to look at bringing them within the same framework that we just did with gold and silver companies, bringing crypto companies under money services businesses and custodians for digital assets, and just switching it from gold and silver to adding digital assets under that regulatory framework. So Florida is the model for the rest of the country. Look, the other states that have electronic currency, they're getting major pushback. Like in Louisiana, they're asking, why do we need as a state to operate an electronic system? The free market currently does that well, right? So a lot of the bills that are out there trying to make electronic gold and silver legal tender, it brings the questions like, why is the state going to meddle in the free market? And I want to thank the Louisiana legislature for asking these hard questions, because why? The state, as far as I know, and Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the state, anytime it meddles with the free markets, it doesn't do a better job, right? The regulations and running businesses is not the purview of government. Let the free market do that, but set up the regulatory framework like we did in Florida for consumer protections and making sure they have the assets and the rules and regulations to run the business in a way that isn't going to steal from the people. So, yeah.
What do you think the future looks like if if as the sound money movement succeeds, what do you think the future of America's monetary system might look like, with gold and silver playing a bigger role in it?
Yeah, that's the $10 million question, right? Like, what does the future hold? If I had a what is it called? What is that thing called? A little ball.
Crystal ball.
Crystal ball. If I had a crystal ball, man, absolutely. What I think, from being boots on the ground, doing this and seeing the reaction of government officials, having people on the streets asking me because they know me as the gold and silver guy around town, even in Miami and so forth. People came up to me. I was at an event for Byron Donalds, who's running for governor. There's quite a few candidates. We have some great, DeSantis's wife, Casey DeSantis, is running for governor too, and we have a lot of good candidates in Florida to continue what DeSantis has done. I had people come up to me, recognize me for my testimony in Florida, ask me questions, and it's been very positive, very positive. Where I see it, look, we knew fiat was a problem, right? In 1971, when Nixon temporarily took us off the redeemability of gold for the US dollar, that was the first time in human history the entire planet, every government, was on a fiat standard. It was an experiment. And every previous fiat currency throughout the human written history, it's over 6,000 fiat currencies that have come and gone, have all reverted back to its true value, zero. So with all our technology, all the central planning, all the derivatives and different ways, creative ways of trying to maintain a fiat monetary system, it's failing. It is failing miserably. We've been exporting our inflation to other countries. Other countries are tired of us plundering their resources through American corporations. The United States muscling in with the IMF and the World Bank with their dollars. Right? The world's tired of it. They're transacting amongst themselves. BRICS is growing. The reserve status of the United States is struggling. So, and a big part of that is because of the mismanagement of every fiat currency on the planet. It isn't just the U.S. dollar. U.S. dollar is the reserve currency. So we've benefited from the fact that most of the world has been taking our inflation and using it for transactions amongst their central banks and buying and selling and so forth. That is coming to an end. And as G. Edward Griffin said in Hidden Secrets of Money, those pigeons are going to come home to roost, and that inflation we've been exporting is going to come back, and it's going to be devastating. And what we have been doing for the last 2 years has been educating legislators on economics. My job last year, 90% of it wasn't pushing the legislation. It was educating legislators across the country on economics, not sound money principles, not sound money economics, just economics in general, about the dollar, inflation, and so forth. I think that experiment is now 54-year experiment of fiat. In August, it will be 54 years, has failed. I think the everybody's realizing it. I think the state legislators are realizing we can't trust the federal government's deficit spending anymore. And I think that's why we're seeing this huge wave. It's like a perfect storm. Gold and silver aren't going up. That dollar and fiat currencies around the world are tanking at an extraordinary rate. That's why gold and silver is going up in currency terms. Gold and silver always maintains its purchasing power. It pretty much buys the same thing over the last 2,000 years. You can buy a toga for an ounce of gold. You can buy a nice tuxedo 110 years ago with an ounce of gold. You can buy a really nice tuxedo today with an ounce of gold. Gold and silver maintains purchasing power. So where I see the world going is, I'm not going to call it a reset. I'm just going to call it another financial collapse, like Greece, like Venezuela, like Zimbabwe. We're going to transition to something else. Look, historically, there has been, since for the last 150 years, about every 30 to 40 years, there is a change in the monetary system. We had the gold standard for like almost 90 years, give or take. Then we had Bretton Woods for about 30 years, right? And if you just keep going back in history, every 30 to 50 years, plus or minus, there is a change in the monetary system, a change in world currencies. We are way past due date for a global change. And I think the reason why it's lasted this long is because the whole world and the whole system, they don't want it to collapse. So I think if you look at what the central banks are doing around the world, they are buying up gold like crazy. The central banks are getting rid of their fiat and buying real assets. JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America are creating systems to create real world asset backed digital currencies, creating a pool of digital currencies with gold, silver, real estate. We're moving to an age of real world asset currencies. And for that to happen, this whole fiat system with imaginary money needs to end, or they need to reevaluate the price of gold and silver and attach it to and back it with gold. At least 40%. There's a theoretical economic threshold that if you back to any currency with 40% gold, then that it stabilizes that currency. Now, I don't like that model. I don't like it because we can't trust the government. Every time we tried to trust the government in backing the currency with gold and silver, they just print it in oblivion like they've always have. What I want to see, which we had on a panel on that, we had Jeff Diaz and others discuss this, that we can't immediately go to a gold and silver standard where gold and silver is the federal currency. But my argument was we don't need to eliminate the Federal Reserve notes right away. We just create a parallel economy with the states making gold and silver legal tender. We have the technology to make it digital, transactional, functional today. And we just have it running parallel and let people choose. I love free markets. I love free choice. Let people choose where they want to put their economic energy, as I call it, as Mike Maloney said in his Hidden Secrets of Money. That's where I get the idea of economic energy. Put your money where you think it's going to be preserved the best. Do we put it in the failing fiat system? In my opinion, it's failing. Or do we put it in what's been money for nearly 10,000 years in human history? Really, let's call it 5,000 years, and really coinage for about almost 3,000 years. And that's where I see it, man. I think we're moving to a real world asset world. I think that gold and silver is going to come back as a preeminent currency. Heck, Basel III, a year or two ago, they already elevated gold from a commodity, and the Bank of London even mentioned that gold is acting more like a currency than a commodity today. And Basel III has elevated gold to currency. So I mean, I think that's the future.
Well, it certainly seems like, from so many kind of big economic events that sometimes things happen, you can see them coming and they happen slowly, but the ones that I remember seem to happen. A few people saw them coming, but then they just happen all at once. Maybe because everyone else, all the expert class, are in denial about what's happening, even if it could be seen. For so many of the expert class, the housing crisis seemed to come from nowhere, even though Ron Paul had been predicting it for quite a while, and others like Peter Schiff and others. What is astounding to me is to think that, as you note, I think, given a long enough timeline, you're right. All fiat currencies have come to zero. It is hard to believe that the U.S. dollar is going to be the only one to break that rule of history. So there will come a day. I don't know. We don't know the time. We don't know when it'll happen. I see some people who suggest that maybe the dollar will actually strengthen in the short run, because all the other fiat currencies around the world are losing value and the dollar is sucking up the value of, as people flee those sinking ships that are sinking faster.
Yeah.
But what is certain is that is the general trajectory, particularly as you have major economic actors like the BRICS nations trying to build to kind of erode the dollar status as a global reserve currency. And certainly our own political administrations have not helped that matter, but with all the inflation that they've generated. And what is astounding to me is state governments that stand in the way of their own people being able to save in sound money. Yeah. I know that, I came from Maine, as folks know, and what is so frustrating and astounding to this very day is that in the state of Maine, if you were to try to acquire gold or silver, you pay a sales tax on it. You pay a pretty high sales tax, actually, that Maine has. And then if you sell it and it's appreciated in value relative to the dollar, of course, with inflation, that doesn't actually mean it's increased in value at all if the dollar's just declined in value. You also pay capital gains tax on it, right? So you pay sales tax and you pay capital gains tax. That's a double tax. If you purchase a stock or a bond, you don't pay sales tax. You might pay capital gains tax, but you don't pay sales tax.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of the only assets I know of where you get kind of hit on both ends. At least in the state of Maine, and imagine a few other states. Maine is thankfully, I think, one of the last few that charges a sales tax on gold and silver, though it's not thankful for the people who live there. I'm so grateful to live in a state where, regardless of what the status of gold and silver is, there's no sales tax and there's no capital gains tax at all on anything. So I don't have to worry about it. I don't know what the legal tender status is here in New Hampshire, though. I should, we aren't there yet.
No, you guys don't have legal tender. We've tried. You
have a good bill sponsor? Do you need help linking up with any folks?
Not the Free State Project, but if New Hampshire wants to help make gold and silver legal tender, they only have to talk to one person. That is Representative John Hunt. He takes pride in killing every single gold and silver piece of legislation that comes to his committee. So either people need to convince him to change his mind on gold and silver and stop taking pride in killing gold and silver, or somebody needs to challenge him and kick him out of his seat.
This is Senator or Representative?
Representative John Hunt. He's been there for over 30 years. He is the heir to Alcoa, so he has the money to fend off any campaigns. But I understand that the way it works is you only represent around 3,000 people, give or take. And I think he's in a single member district. So it's either convince him to stop blocking legal tender legislation, or have some freedom-loving Free State Project citizens run against John Hunt and bring that up, because
he runs the committee that it generally goes through.
Yep.
I wonder if the Bitcoin bill must have gone through a different committee.
No, I think I went through. Representative Keith Amon is the vice chair of that committee, so I think. Yeah, they have, because I think Bitcoin was the main thing. That might be the reason why.
I think they led with the Bitcoin, but they slipped in. By the way, you can do gold and silver too with the state treasury. So.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great conversation with multiple people. The executive director of what is the Liberty group there that puts up the card of which legislators are,
the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance.
Yeah, I talked to executive director and several people at Liberty Forum, and we were talking about how to do that and get rid of or convince or get rid of Representative Hunt, because he is the number one roadblock from preventing legal tender status of gold and silver and elevating it from personal property. And I know this because our late founder, Jim Forsythe, had lunch with him after we lobbied and it didn't get through the committee. And he was joking, laughing about it at lunch, that he takes pride and pleasure of killing all gold and silver legislation. We talked to him before the hearing, and he says that he doesn't see why they need to make gold and silver. That his financial analyst does a great job managing his portfolio. Well, when you're worth over $1 billion or close to $1 billion, yeah, I mean, you're not struggling. You're doing well, but the common folk are struggling. And 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and you're not in touch with the common person, Representative Hunt, if that is what your mind frame is. So that is sorry, I went on a tirade because I know exactly where the problem is. And I want to make it very clear to your listeners in New Hampshire, he is the problem.
Well, it's I appreciate knowing. I'm still learning so much about all the goings on in the New Hampshire legislature. It was It's strange to go from Maine, where I knew all the political players, to New Hampshire, where I'm still feel like I'm learning a lot every day. So now I'll have to look up this Representative John Hunt, and of course the Free State Project does not do any lobbying or any. But you
just provide.
You're in Representative John Hunt's district. You know, it's isn't it your civic duty to share your opinion with him?
Absolutely. So. I'm just educating your followers. So.
Well, that's awesome. So it was good to have you back at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum this year. How was your experience?
Man, I loved it. When I first got there, the ambiance was a little different. I was used to last year's. But as it got along, man, your break-off dialogues were fantastic. The speakers, the Soho Forum, where you should have won, but because of the way Soho does it.
I had the majority of the room. That's not how Oxford rules work.
Yeah. No, it was great, man. I you know which speech I loved the most? Jeff Deist, the keynote
Yeah,
speaker at the dinner.
yeah. It was a I would say it was a challenging speech. Some people came up to me afterwards and said like how much they loved kind of a talk that wasn't just confirming all of our libertarian preconceptions. And then there were some other people who didn't like didn't like. I feel like a good speaker at an event like this it should be challenging. It should be
Yeah.
provocative. It should make you think. And of course, for those who weren't there, by the way, people can find the video. It's up on our social media. But he talked about lessons of the lessons of Trumpism and kind of what the libertarian community, the liberty community should take away as lessons learned by this. This crazy historic happenstance of Donald Trump's rise and fall and rise again, and why libertarians should learn to embrace populism as a strategy, and a number of other things. What were some takeaways for you that stood out for you there that made it your favorite speech?
He talked about how the early, like I was talking about earlier, that we were standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And he was asking the questions like, what if Rothbard, what if Hayek weren't so staunch in their beliefs? Maybe they would have actually got something passed in legislation. Maybe the movement would have, if people weren't so how do you say? I guess staunch in their ideology. Because there was a point where he was talking about between ideology and I think what he was trying to bring was populism, right? Populism is getting feedback from the people and what is possible, while ideology is so staunch that it prevents things from getting through, which I think was kind of where your Soho panel was kind of getting at. Do we focus on DC and leave that alone, or just focus on a small community and just do that? And I think ultimately we agreed that it should be a mix of the two. I think that's what really resonated with me. Like, let's be realistic about our ideologies. Let's be realistic about our beliefs and do what is possible. And don't be so I can't find the right word.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for like letting the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Right. And I know it's a controversial take, but I certainly do see Donald Trump as like the very, very right. You don't get to go to war with the army that you want to have. You go to war with the army that you have, right? And what we needed was Ron Paul, and what we ended up with was Donald Trump. And I don't think that we should give up our. I like how Edward Snowden framed it at the Bitcoin conference last year. Give a man your vote, but don't give him your soul. Like,
yeah.
There's some moments where I really cringe and get worried about some of the things I see the Trump administration doing. But what bothers me most is the people who they're just like so on the team. They can't hear any criticism. Like, he could change his mind from one day to the other and their mind will change with him. Right. Yeah. It's like, I'd rather be the person, the loyal opposition, like when someone who I supported is doing the wrong thing, saying, you're doing the wrong thing and you're supposed to be doing the right thing. And this is the right thing. You're supposed to be ending wars, not starting wars. You're supposed to be cutting spending, not raising spending. Right. And we can have those, we can try to push back and we can make those criticisms without giving up totally on our convictions.
Yeah, and that goes back to the 10 characteristics of winning and losing candidates, right? And one of those lists that Morton Blackwell mentioned is hire as many people to the right as you as to the left, right? Like, you want to have, you don't want yes men, you don't want everybody you don't want an echo chamber of like, yeah. You need to find people on the right and left in you. In the conservative movement, more libertarian leaning, more socially conservative, and then come somewhere in the middle. You want to have multiple people to bounce ideas off, and then you have your inner circle, right, where you take everything in from the people to the right and left in you, and then you make your decision with your smaller inner circle. And that's luckily I have a great board, and our executive team is that smaller inner circle. and we get feedback from our advisory board, we get feedback from others, and then ultimately I come back to the three of us, me, my chair, and one of our board members, and we make decisions. We have a few advisors come in, but ultimately, and I think that's a great model. People to the right and left of us, we all you balance each other out, and I think that's why I love Jeff Deist's speech so much, man, because it was so realistic. He was such a realist at that point. He even talked about, his own personal journey. He's transformed a lot in the last 10, 15 years, he admitted in that speech. So I'm looking forward to catching up with him. We exchanged phone numbers, and next time he's in Florida or next time in Alabama, we'll try to meet up and talk a little bit more. I wanted to talk to him, but Jeff, what's his name? Kaufman sat next to him, and before I could move and sit next to Jeff Deist. So, but yeah, no, it was a great event, man. I loved Liberty Forum this year. My favorite dialogue was the Marriage Liberty Act, which was a unique.
Oh, all right, Mitch Mitchell. He'll be glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get him into the Christian conservative movement, because that's one of the biggest issues. It isn't just a libertarian issue. Religious religions wants the state out of marriage, and I think changing it from family court to civil court is genius. I think that solves a lot of the problems out there.
Awesome. Well, we will be releasing the audio of all of the dialogues that took place at Liberty Forum on one of our podcast streams on Spotify. So we'll be sure to announce that when it happens. And Daniel, your remarks, I'm not sure when we have it on the schedule, but we are releasing one video a day from Liberty Forum for about the next month. We've done about a week of that. So your video, your remarks will be published sometime in the next couple of weeks, as well as the panel discussion that you were on regarding the future of sound money in a multipolar world. So those will both be coming up. Folks will have to watch for that, and I'll make sure we tag you on it so you see it when it comes out.
Appreciate that.
Any final words you want to share with folks before we wrap up, Daniel?
Yeah. If you like what we're doing across the country, and it isn't just across the country, because what happened in Florida, Missouri, we've had people reach out from Australia, Germany, the UK, wanting us to work with them to come up with sound money legislation. So if you like what we're doing, not just in the US, but us working with other countries, support our organization. We have a Pioneer membership. It's $25 a year. And if you donate $100, we'll send you a free ounce of digital silver through Kinesis. You can go to www.citizens, the number 4, not FOR, the number 4, soundmoney.org. Click on Become a Member, and you can just sign up. All the proceeds go to helping us fund the operations. And then if you want a tax deduction, you can go to www.soundmoneymovement.org. That's our 501c3 education foundation. The purpose of that organization is to educate generations of people of all generations on the necessity of sound money for a free economy and a free society to exist. So we're coming up with free curriculum online. We're once we make gold and silver legal tender across the country, we're looking to make financial literacy mandatory, and including sound money principles and financial literacy courses within the schools and so forth. So if you support what we're doing, please go to Sound Money Movement or Citizens for Sound Money, become a Pioneer member, or donate to our C3 for a tax write-off.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you again. And congratulations to our the second freest state in the country, Florida, nipping at our heels, getting a little bit more freedom. And we'll have to get that legal tender law passed in New Hampshire before too long. Representative John Hunt. All right, I've got that name written down. I'll remember. He's the obstacle. Well, Daniel, really appreciate it, and thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on again.
All right, everyone, that's the show. Thank you as always for joining us for another great episode. I want to remind you, PorcFest is coming June 16th through the 22nd. I gave you the whole rundown, all these speakers, all these great things happen at PorcFest at the start of the show. Just remember, you don't want to miss this. Come out, taste the revolution, see what's being built here in New Hampshire. Join us for our pop-up free society for a week with so many of the great libertarian leaders and thinkers and speakers from around the country and the world, all in Lancaster, New Hampshire, at Rogers Campground under the shadow of the beautiful White Mountains. How could you miss this? Come taste the revolution. One pot cook-off, great stuff going on at Porcupines for families. Great main stage pavilion talks, plus all of our hubs. This, like PorcFest, if you've never been, it's like festivals within festivals, because it's not just what the Free State Project puts on and the speakers that we bring in, but it's what everyone at the festival builds together, for including all of the many hubs that groups come in and they put up their own events. It's going to be great. Porcfest.com. Use the discount code Granite Gulch for 10% off. And remember, ticket prices are going up on Friday. So this Thursday, tomorrow, as of the time that this video posts, will be your last opportunity to get tickets before prices go up. So act quick. Get your tickets, porcfest.com, Granite Gulch, 10% off. I can only say it so many times. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our producer, Renita, for making us look so good. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.